Welcome, travelers, to another episode of the Time Travel Trio podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Hyde.
And we're
The Time Travel Trio.
Episode 72, guys.
Woo!
Yes.
That's
It's
a lot of episodes.
A lot of episodes.
It's a lot.
It's several books worth of A Song of Ice and Fire, which
Yes.
are
Spoilers.
notoriously long books.
Put them on audio book. Just have us narrate Game of Thrones books.
Oh my god.
A whole lot of
horrible.
names.
Janice do all the voices of the female characters.
If you've made it this far, congratulations.
Ooh.
You get a pat on the back from us.
And if you're new, still a pat on the back, because we appreciate you.
If you're new, please start from the better movies in the beginning of the podcast. So, today...
Yeah, we're doing Game of Thrones.
This was your choice.
Yeah, specifically the episode The Door, because it shows some of the magic in the world and kind of how time-bendy it can be.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's talk about our relationship with Game of Thrones. Why don't you start, since you chose this?
So I've been watching the show since day one. I didn't really know anything about A Song of Ice and Fire before the show.
That's the book.
That's the name of the book. But when the show came out, I was like, sure, HBO, it's like a fantasy world drama type show. And so, I got into it. Not really knowing what to expect. And so, it was good.
Hyde?
Well, my sister read the books, and she's a big Game of Thrones fan. Like, she has like a custom-made wooden Stark crest that she used to have over her bed.
Wow. That's
So
serious.
she's big. She literally, one time she was dating a guy and he got her an egg from Daenerys Targaryen. And she's like, I'm not House Targaryen, I'm House Stark. Get it together. And she hated the gift. She
That's
told him to his
hilarious.
face. Like, you weren't paying attention because clearly you would know. So I used to watch the show with her because she knew what was going to happen beforehand. So she had read all the books. And so, of course, episodes like, the Red Wedding and stuff, she had a lot of fun watching with me next to her.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
But I've been watching the show pretty much following the show since it came out. So I'm a fan of the show. I wouldn't call myself a fanatic like my sister or some other people, but I enjoy the show. Like, I watch it every week when it comes out. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So, here's the thing. This is going to be...
We couldn't just all like it.
It's not last. Here's the thing. This is going to be a challenge for me to get through this episode. It's fine. It's not going to be the thing that I've hated the most that we've had to do on the podcast. I can tell you that up front. It's not going to be that bad. But my relationship with this show is very complicated. It's kind of like someone I tried to date once who just won't ever leave me alone, and everyone just keeps talking about it.
Yeah, like they're friends with all your friends, and like you can't get away from them.
All I want to do is just escape it, and I can't. So here's the thing: I've tried to start watching the show multiple times, at least 3, maybe 4 times that I've watched the first 6 episodes of the first season, and I've genuinely wanted to give it a chance. Everyone loves it; it's a big thing. Fine, whatever. I've tried so many times and just can't get into it. I have this weird thing where I just can't get into political shows. And even though, yes, this is fantasy, I put that in quotes because fantasy is like a stepchild of this show, I'd say, honestly. I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as a fantasy show with political, drama, but it's political drama and there's a little bit of fantasy.
Right. Even on IMDb it says action, adventure, drama.
Exactly.
Fantasy.
Yeah. And so that's kind of, if it was more fantasy, less politics, I probably would get into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I just can't, I have a weird thing, I just cannot get into political shows.
Yeah.
I've tried so many different ones, so many different times. I've tried to watch The Crown, I've tried to watch West Wing, I've tried to watch it, you name it, I have tried. I genuinely give it a chance and it just bores me. I don't know, I've never been super interested in politics. Anyway, that aside, I did watch, so all I've seen is the first half of the first season, and then I'm just fuck it, I don't want to watch this show. So, what we did though was Matt had me watch, there was an hour-long recap that HBO did before season 7 came out.
Yeah, so it was season 1 through season 6 recapped. Really quickly, they glossed over some really big moments, but in general, it kind of set the world to what Jen needed to know for this episode, essentially.
Right. So I am caught up. I know who the characters are. I know pretty much what's going on. I know what's happening. So, I can hold my own in this conversation. But just as like a side note, it's not just going to be like a love fest of us talking about how much we love Game of Thrones because I'm in here, which actually I think is probably better.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because, like, this episode specifically, once they're talking about the Iron Throne, or not the Iron Throne, the Iron Islands, and, like, the Theon and his sister are talking about who owns the throne, who, like, has the right to rule the nation or whatever, Jen's just like, I can't follow, I'm out.
There's so many times, not so many times, but probably, like, 3 different times while we were watching this episode that I was just like, this is why I don't watch this show.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that stupid-ass scene with the Greyjoys was, like... 3 hours long, it felt like. Like, who gives a flying fuck? Just pick whoever you're gonna put on and let the drama continue. Like, that's my big thing with this show, which I honestly think is, like, not just me, but things take a very long time to happen. And, yeah, there's conversations, and because there's so many characters and so many moving pieces going on, I get it. Everyone can't have, like, action and, like, scenes where things are actually happening every single time, and that's fine. I don't want a show like that. But if you're gonna name this an action-adventure show, like, I want to see some action and adventure. There really wasn't that much in this episode, to be honest with you.
No, there actually isn't. I will say, if you wanted to watch just a straight-up Game of Thrones episode for the action, a good episode to see would be the episode where the White Walkers attack that village and Jon Snow's in there. Yeah. Maybe the Battle of the Bastards. That's another good action show.
Yeah, Blackwater. Yeah, there are lots of episodes where it's just about a battle. You only follow one group of people, and they have one long, intense battle. But there's only like a couple of those in a season.
Yeah.
So you guys admit that there is a lot of empty, quote-unquote, empty space where people just have conversations about things that might happen in the future.
Well, I wouldn't call it empty space, but it's definitely... Sometimes it's filler. And sometimes
you have to just be invested in the world to care about it.
You just have to be in it.
I mean, that said, the Greyjoys are definitely the least interesting family in this.
I would agree.
In the universe, because like they're just a naval armed family. They have boats, and ultimately at this point in the story, spoilers for the entire show. We're gonna go past season 6. We're gonna talk about season 7 sometimes because it happened in the world. But like they're there to kind of just service themselves and help Dany at some point a little bit, but it's more about them fighting each other. It's, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure, and it feels that way when you're watching, especially as someone who's like not super invested. But like even like the scenes with Daenerys, even the scenes with Arya, even Sansa, I'd say like were more interesting to me, and in this episode particularly because they feel like they think they're the most important thing, but they know they're overlooked, but they still feel like that's a mistake of everyone else who interacts with them.
Right.
And that's like how it also is like watching them as characters on the show, you know, like kind of in a meta way that if they weren't in this episode, it wouldn't have lost anything for me. You know?
No, I think it's good to have someone like you talking about this episode because me and Matt, we're invested. We're in it. We're in it to like follow this all the way through.
Yeah, and not even bandwagon either. Like you said, Hyde, we've been in there since day 1, pretty much. I mean, for me, I think it was literally day 1 that I watched the first episode. And for you, just as early. So, you know, I think for us, we're not the people that like, you know, we get tattoos for the show, but we like the show. We enjoy it for all of its, you know, kind of more boring moments. Like even the Littlefinger is a little piece of shit. Like he's the integral part of the story, and even someone like the bald guy, Varys or whatever.
Varys.
Yeah. He in this episode, he's kind of like he's with Tyrion. Like he's been in there since the beginning, and so he's kind of like had his own little weaving his own webs, and so to see him kind of be put in his place was kind of satisfying. Like over the whole course of the 6 seasons, you know. Mm-hmm. So those moments where if you don't really know him or invest in him, it's kind of lost, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but this show, you know, my complaints and whatever aside, they're all valid, I understand that this show is not a show where you just jump into a random episode and watch it and can appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I'm aware of that, so don't come at me, all you stupid a-holes on Facebook who like to just complain nonstop to us. Like, fucking put a stick up your own butt, because there's already one there. You could just put another one in there, because clearly your butthole is that big. And I understand that, yes, I'm complaining, but this is our fucking podcast, so you can get over yourselves. Okay.
That is the quote of the episode right now. Put another one up there. Just gotta remember that.
Sometimes I am very happy that we have listeners who are very passionate and dedicated to our show, but
Yes.
sometimes they need to just take a step back and understand that bitching to us is not going to change anything. The episode is already the episode. We're not going to go back and change it. Okay?
Right.
Okay. So, you mentioned Littlefinger. I liked that scene. It kind of opened the episode, and
Yeah.
especially as someone who, yeah, I watched the recap, but I haven't really seen much of Sansa since she and Joffrey were a thing,
Yeah,
really.
definitely.
So,
yeah, and
it's
she's
nice-
definitely grown the most in
Yeah,
the show,
it's
I would
nice.
say.
It's nice to see her kind of stand up for herself that way. Granted, she was like, "Sure, I'll get someone else to fight you," and that kind of like bothered me a little bit. But like, I also understand like maybe that's just this world. But she was
Well,
like,
yeah.
"I can fight you here. Brienne can kill you right now if I asked her to," and I'm like, "Well, why can't you kill him right now if you wanted to?" That's
Right.
Yeah.
I get that that's this world, but like
Well, it's also
in a
part
general
of...
sense, that's kind of frustrating.
Well, it's also her understanding what she's capable of, because she never trained in fighting, and her country, the North, they're really weak at this moment. They're really barely hanging on by a thread at this point.
Right, I
You know.
understand. She's not trained in fighting, whatever. But it just like I'm just saying it would be more impactful as a character, just in general, if like it just for me as someone who's not super invested in this world, it just like took away from it a little bit. But I did like I guess at the very least that she was standing up for herself
Right.
a little bit more.
Even
and,
if
like,
it was Captain
doing her own
Phasma
thing.
at her side. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was funny, like, during recap, Jen was like, "Who's Brienne?" I was like, "Oh yeah, she's this like really badass noble warrior. She was Captain Phasma in Star Wars, even though it's like didn't help because like she had a mask on the
Right,
entire
she's a
movie."
mask.
But for me, I just knew her because I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's Brienne."
hmm So I like that. There was like a little promo. So if those who haven't seen this episode in a little bit, I'm sure it's called The Door, so I'm sure you remember that part. But to get a little bit of a recap to know what else is going on in this episode, this is a promo.
Sansa.
Did you know about Ramsay?
Does death only come for the wicked and leave the decent behind?
Who makes a claim?
I claim the Salt Throne.
Knowledge has made you powerful, but there's still so much you don't know.
Run, wake up!
So it's a pretty short promo, but
Yeah, probably visual, but if you've seen the show, you know what they're talking about, I guess.
yeah. And we'll get into all the brand stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of brand stuff.
But actually for me, it didn't feel like there was that much Bran in this episode. And like maybe for you guys, I don't maybe in comparison to how much you usually see him, it felt like a lot. But like for me, it was like maybe 20 minutes in and we hadn't even seen him yet. And I was like, why is there so much other stuff going on? And this is the main episode that we're doing for the podcast.
Right. Well,
So-
I think the thing about The Door that kind of surprised everyone, it is kind of a surprise. Like, it's what makes it work so well, in my opinion, is that you think it's going to be another kind of, not filler episode, but a very heavy political episode, which it is on the front end, and then all of a sudden it becomes this life or death escape that they have to do.
Mhm.
Because up to this point, we've had maybe one really big confrontation with the White Walkers. Like, there's really
Yeah, the
hasn't
big battle.
been the big battle with them in the village. So the White Walkers have been kind of on the outskirts. They're more like legendary creatures to everyone. And then all of a sudden you're in this very real situation with the White Walkers where you see just how dangerous they are, even in a small group. And so it was kind of like, whoa. I remember watching it and being totally caught by surprise. Just how, like, because you just kind of think they're far away. And then all of a sudden when they're right there, you're like, run.
Yeah. I know, this is definitely also a more magical episode. Like, if you look at the whole scope of the show, in 7 seasons now, there's lots of, like, magic. There's, like, a through line of magic, but in an episode, you can go several episodes without seeing anything magical.
Yes.
Like, not counting her dragons. Dragons, yeah, they're bad or creatures, but they're not magic. They don't invoke magic. But, like, seeing the children of the forest, do their stuff and seeing their past and seeing Bran with his visions and all that stuff, that's definitely way more focused on this episode. At the end, they kind of, like, the main focus of an episode at the end will be, like, a big moment, usually, where someone will die, or so like it's not that's pretty common to have the meat of the episode be saved to the end, and it's an hour-long show, so you have to get through a lot of no meat to get to the meat sometimes.
For sure, and I get that. And like even the stuff with Arya, I didn't mind that. She, I think, is one of the more interesting characters on the show, so that I didn't mind watching. Especially like seeing her reaction to seeing like these people making fun of her family and like her life, basically. I thought was pretty powerful to kind of see. Like at first she like found it funny, like they were making fun of Robert Baratheon, and then like all of a sudden they were like making fun of her dad and her sister and like making it a big joke spectacle, and like people were laughing and enjoying it, and she just like watching her face I thought was pretty interesting. So I did like that. I like Tyrion. I think he's cool.
Yeah, Tyrion's always been a good... I mean, everyone loves Tyrion.
Yeah,
he's always been, like, the main character that people want to root for.
Yeah.
Especially now that he's with Dany, who's also a character that people want to root for. So it's like, they're finally together!
Mm-hmm.
It's Tyrion, I mean, now I'm forgetting the actor's name.
Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage. He's the only one of the group who's actually won an Emmy for acting. I mean, there's a lot of solid acting. I mean, they have Max von Sydow in the show, but who's also pretty prominent in this episode. But, Peter Dinklage is kind of seen as him and Lena Headey are kind of seen as the two premier actors on the show. With Nicholas Coster-Waldau.
Yeah, Jamie
Lannister probably being a close third
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like, which is funny, the Lannisters are all the ones who get like the big acting accolades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think it's also because they are maybe the more complex characters.
Yeah.
I mean, the show is definitely filled with a lot of complex characters who have grown and evolved and whatever on the show, but like for the most part, like, yeah, we know that the Starks are good people. We know that Dany's a dude. It's just like they're more interesting because they're not people you would necessarily root for, but you kind of still are so fascinated to see what they're going to do because they're more unpredictable, I think, in that way. Just as characters, like...
Oh, yeah. I mean, Cersei Lannister...
Yeah.
Is my favorite character of the show because I tell people all the time, it's like, it's not that I want her to win, it's just that the show would not be interesting without her around.
Oh, totally. It would just be like children bickering almost without her in a
Yeah, she definitely
degree.
starts shit. She goes all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. She does.
No half measures with her.
You're great. That's a good way of putting it. There's no half measure of her.
Like when she this was in the recap, but when she burned that whole
where she blew up the septum, and when that happened in the show, there's so many like threads that were kind of happening, and then like she just wiped out so many storylines with that explosion, and it was just like, oh shit, yep, there goes Marjorie, there goes the whole like religious sect, and there goes her other son who's the current king.
Mm-hmm.
It was all gone in like a span of 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I do like about the show. I think they exploit it a little bit too much sometimes. That they're like, we can kill anyone, here's proof, and they like, it feels sometimes as someone who's not like super invested in the show. One, I can see both sides of it because I do appreciate a show that's like that.
Yeah.
But on the same side, I feel like sometimes on this show, just from like what I hear in pop culture and in my everyday life, because people, as I mentioned, never stop talking about this show when it's on. But I feel like they're constantly still trying to prove that to you. Like, we can do whatever we want. We're going to kill these people. Oh, wait, Jon Snow's not dead. Blah, blah, blah. It's just like, they make their own rules, and that's fine.
Yeah.
This is their show. But sometimes I'm like, killing someone just for the sake of proving that you can kill them isn't an interesting plot point. That's just my opinion.
No, I mean, I know what you're saying. I saw Matt was about to say something. I didn't want to.
Well, no, I was just going to say that, yeah, that is true, and you are right, too, because at this point in the show, in Season 7, there are characters with that plot armor now, where even though, anyone could still die, there are some people that we know will not die, because they're crucial to the story. Like, sure, Dany may ultimately die in the end, but in Season 7, she's not going to die.
Yeah.
Jon Snow in Season 7, after he already did die in the end of Season 5 or whatever, he's not going to die again, because he's so crucial to the story at this point. Yeah. And everyone knew that he wasn't fully dead because, like, it wouldn't be a good story. It would be horrible storytelling to lay all this groundwork for him and then to not have it be fulfilled. Yeah, like, you can kill someone and that's be shocking, like Ned Stark. But with Jon Snow, there's, like, mythic, I don't know, weight to his character that, like, to kill him would just be like bad storytelling at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was something that people complained about a lot with season 7.
It is a
spoiler alert for those who've not seen season 7. In season 7, pretty much almost no major characters die in season 7.
Yeah.
Almost everyone just has plot armor for like a whole season. A few minor and maybe some nostalgic characters do bite the bullet in season 7, but first of all, talking about fast, there is no filler in season 7.
Yeah, I was telling Jen, like season 7, like they're out of the books. Everyone has fast travel now, which I actually appreciated, because what do you want to do? Wait for 2 episodes for someone to get somewhere? Like, you know, like you can pass time quickly without having someone say, it's been 3 months since I've seen you. Like, just have it be like, we need to go there, and then go to where they get there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I some people did not like that, and it was a little whiplash sometimes.
Yeah.
I think maybe one more episode would have evened the pace out a little bit. That being said, it was refreshing that a character's like, I'm going to King's Landing. And then 10 minutes later in the episode, they're at King's Landing. You're just like, oh, okay.
I wonder if the show had been more like that from the beginning, that I would have been more invested, because it wouldn't have felt as slow going for things to happen.
I think it would have been a lot. Well, the thing about it is, I think people like you would have been more invested. I also think it would have given a lot of people more of a sense of scale and geography, because season 7 totally wrecked what sense of scale and geography I had in my mind mentally of like how long it takes to get places. Like I thought that like Westeros was like the size of maybe like Europe, North America, maybe even Africa, and it turns out it's more the size of just like America, like, which is still pretty big, but not that big. Like,
I mean, for the most part, people are on horseback and in boats, you know. But it's funny because, like, it's almost like people are flying through, and at one point, someone is literally flying through that. Like, when Dany has to save Jon, spoiler, she is on a dragon, so she can get there pretty quickly because she's literally flying to them. But for the most part, if you're on a boat, it's like, a 10-minute scene, and then they're there. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some time passing behind the scenes. Like, I think Sam is the one that, like, he's getting around quick because he's in that one city, and then he has to get to Jon, so he gets to Winterfell pretty quickly. But time passes, and we don't see it happen. That's fine with me.
Right.
Gotcha. I want to kind of see what you guys think, kind of going back to what I was talking about with people dying just for the sake of being dramatic, and kind of see how you guys feel with comparing that to a show like Lost, who I feel like kind of more broke the mold of that, because it obviously came out before Game of Thrones, but not that people didn't die in the book, but in TV world, before Lost, we were kind of used to, well, these are our main characters, they're gonna live, that's who we know. But then Lost was kind of like, wait a minute, you don't know what's going on, Charlie's gonna die, he's been a main character, you know, like all this kind of stuff, that people die. You know, like we follow, like, even Anna Lucia, who, like, thank God, because she was the most annoying, but not that all those women weren't annoying, because they were, but she was a character who, okay, she's like the Jack of the Tailies, fine, that's cool, and then, you know, we're like, okay, this is going to be an interesting dynamic, there's a power struggle now, like, we're ready to see this, and then all of a sudden she's, like, dead at the end of season 2.
Right.
And so, stuff like that of kind of, granted, yes, Lost did that a little bit too, of like, hey, we can kill whoever we want, but it didn't feel as gratuitous as Game of Thrones. So I was curious to see if you guys felt that comparison was kind of similar.
Do you want to go first, man?
No, you can go.
Well, I think Lost was pretty good at it. I think Lost didn't necessarily kill off characters. I don't think they got too crazy with the killing off characters. There was some characters I was sad they killed, like Mr. Echo and stuff like that. That being said, I think Lost, their problem was not killing off characters. I think their problem was killing off plot lines. I think less problem with the characters, more problem with the plot lines. Game of Thrones is very good at keeping the plot lines going. Yeah. And, like, almost killing off the characters kind of, like, streamlines certain plots. But I do agree, there's been some points, like the Red Wedding, the blowing up of the temple. I think those are great mass destruction moments of, like, characters dying. Battle of the Bastards. There's some moments where you're like, okay, I guess they had to kill this person, but it seems a little gratuitous. But I think there's a show way worse than Game of Thrones with that, and that's The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is horrible with killing off characters. And they kill off characters... Walking Dead has gotten to the point where they kill off characters... It's not even like plot armor, it's like... it's like logic armor almost. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, that show is frustrating. I stopped watching it. For the record.
It's frustrating to watch. Not
Yeah.
because I want the sense of danger that anyone can die, but too often with The Walking Dead, it feels like people die because the writers don't know what to do with that character, rather than that this was the plan the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we wanted to do. This helps us build something else. Like, how many times we're going to have a character, like, lose someone close to them and be like, I just have to learn to get stronger. It's like, well, okay, we've covered that for, like, 4 seasons now.
Yeah.
So let's mix something up.
Yeah, the person that dies is like, don't fight anymore, work together, and then they get mad and kill some more. It's like, that's the opposite of what they're saying. Like that's a lesson they learn. It's like every single time.
I actually think, in comparison with that's something that a show like Lost actually did better.
Yes, I agree.
Because,
Yeah.
like, Boone dying, like, in the middle of season 1, I
Yes.
thought was, like, a big, like, step back, like, whoa,
Yeah,
wait a minute.
I agree.
Like, what's going on? And then Shannon dies in season 2. Like, that, it felt like the stakes were real. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, just because you're a main character and you're on this, like, magical island doesn't mean that you're not still able to be killed. If
Yeah,
you're John Locke or, I mean, well, even technically John Locke dies, but, like,
Yeah.
Jack or Kate or Sawyer, like, maybe not. But anyone else pretty much feels like they're fair game.
Right.
Yeah,
And I did appreciate that. And in that sense, it kind of feels, maybe as an outsider, I don't know if it feels differently if you're super invested in Game of Thrones, but for me it feels like, okay, as we kind of talked about, I know the core people who, yeah, they're not really going to die.
At least not until, like, the final season.
Yeah.
True. Like,
Last
end
season,
of-
anyone's
right,
game.
and that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
end of the show, probably most people are going to die in this show, I would imagine, to be honest, just, like, kind of gauging the atmosphere. But that's fine, you know? But just make sure it's a worthwhile reason to kill someone, not just to be dramatic because it's the end of the show.
No, I agree. It has to feel earned. No
Yeah.
matter what. It has to either feel so out of the blue that it shocks you, but you feel like it fit with the story, or it needs to be like the natural end of the character. I think every show like this needs at least one totally out of the blue, shocking death that just is like, you know, the Red Wedding was that out of the blue, shocking death. And you need that. You need that moment, because that made things in Game of Thrones very real. Like, you know, Ned Stark getting his head chopped off was kind of like, okay, I mean, but you kind of could see that coming.
He's like the Boone of season 1.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. But it's also like, it did, the thing I did
It needed to
appreciate
happen.
about that was that it was Sean Bean. If it was someone who I hadn't known before, I actually think it wouldn't have been as effective.
Right.
Because I think they were smart in saying, let's cast Sean Bean. No one's going to think that we're going to kill off one of the biggest stars on the show.
Right.
He's the main, I mean, like, when you're watching season 1, he is the main character
He's
that
the
we're
only
following.
name that you know.
Yeah,
really is.
He's the biggest name
Ed
on that
Stark,
show.
like, that's it.
He's
and
known as
then,
like one of the best sword fighters in the world.
right, and so then when he's killed, you're at first it was like, oh shit, like, what? That's crazy. And then you're like, oh wait, but now look how interesting this is for everyone else who's affected by this.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that's one of those deaths on Game of Thrones that is more effective for like the whole of the world.
Yeah,
and
it
its
definitely
characters.
sets forth a lot. Well, all the Starks, but the world too, because it solidifies King's Landing. It sets forth the war. It does a lot of stuff.
So speaking of shocking deaths, let's talk about Hodor.
Hodor, yeah, that was
Oh,
that was, I would say, one of the most emotional ones.
Yeah.
Just because of how innocent he is as a character. Like, you know, he's a simple mind, and he's a good-hearted person.
he's the Hagrid of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the part giant of the... Yeah.
And, like, if I could relate to how that would feel if, like, Harry and Hagrid were, like, on this mission, and Hagrid, like, had to save them and die. Like, I could sympathize with that. It wasn't, obviously, as emotional for me, because I wasn't as invested in the show, but just watching Bran's expression as he, like, realized what was going on while he was still in the past.
Yeah.
That was really effective.
And seeing young Hodor, like, really kind of drove down that he's just this innocent young mind.
And just going from, what happened? I saw you, you were normal, you were young, you were talking, everything was fine. What happened? And then it's literally his fault, and he, like, watches everything and ends up coming full circle, and then there's nothing he can do about it. It is what it is, and just that realization on his face. Like, I want to give props to the actor who plays Bran, because I thought he did such a good job with that scene, because it's easy to make that over dramatic, to like fall on your knees and just start like wailing or whatever, but he just kind of stood there and he just like had to let it sink in. He had to just watch it happen.
Yeah.
Because, and as we'll talk about, that always happened.
Right.
That consequence of him being there and doing that and whatever, that always happened. And so he knew, he's smart enough, I think, as a character, that he knew there wasn't a way he could stop this.
Yes.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, we can kind of talk about the general sense of what's happening with Bran, but he has this ability to tap into the magic of the world. The children of the forest. They are the magical beings that live in the world, and the magic is kind of like inherent to the land, I would say. And it's partly in the tree that he's at. The what do they call it? The werewood trees or whatever.
Yes. And
that's like a conduit for the magic, but it doesn't come from the tree. It's like the magic is in the world, and that's like a conduit that allows him to tap into it more.
It's like a vessel.
Yeah, so it lets him train the ability that he was working with the Three-Eyed Raven, but he had the ability to work into animals and into Hodor before that he even touched, like, really figured out the tree power.
Well, and when he leaves, too, he's not still touching the tree, but he's still
exactly.
So he kind of has crossed that threshold, I'd say, where he's improved.
Yeah. At that point, he's become the Three-Eyed Raven, but he still needs the tree to hone it in. But yeah, he doesn't need the tree to still be in the past.
Right.
For example,
it's like a power plant, and there's like electrical currents going everywhere. But the power plant is the tree. In layman's terms, magic layman's terms.
No, that's an accurate description. So, how does Bran have this power?
So some people, so to get really meta, outside of the whole show,
all right.
Before the show began, there was the first men.
When God created George R.R. Martin.
Yeah. So basically, like 12,000 years before the show begins,
oh my gosh.
12,000, the land of Westeros was uninhabited by men, like the species of men that are the people that are human beings. There was the children of the forest, there was kind of like mythical stuff, and it was more of like a peaceful magic land. Okay. And then the men came over and they started to battle with the children of the forest, and they kind of, like, the men aren't magical at all, but the children of the forest are, and there's magic elsewhere. Other humans can use magic, but, basically men are just seen as like the brute force people.
Yeah.
And so they kind of drove back the children of the forest and kind of snuffed out the magic. And some of those men kind of inherited the magic by being near it. And so some people have inherent magical abilities still, especially in the north. So some of the Starks, I think some other Starks in the book may have more magic, but Bran is the one that we see have it consistently, where he can work into creatures and other stuff like that. So he's really been the standout. But there are other characters in the world that, like, they're just minor characters that can work into other into animals. Like, one of the wildlings can be into birds and all that stuff. But Bran is the standout of, like, he can control a wolf by necessity, really. He's paralyzed. And Hodor, because he's more of a simple mind. So he just inherently has this ability that's kind of permeating the world, I would say.
So he was just born with it?
Yeah, he's born with it.
Like Lady Gaga?
Yeah. And he's like a little monster. But yeah, so he has it inherently. And other people do, because, like I said, the magic is in the world. Mm-hmm. And so some people are more susceptible to it just by nature, I would say.
So how does he realize that he has it? When does that happen?
Early on.
Yeah,
early in dreams.
Yeah, the dreams gets it. Okay. And then he gets paralyzed, and it's almost like this is my personal theory about it. I don't know if this is in the books or something. My personal theory is after he gets paralyzed for catching Jaime and Cersei in the act, he it's like senses heighten, and since he can't walk, his magic gets like stronger because it's like almost like a survival instinct. Like, oh, you can't walk anymore, better get that magic working.
Yeah, I like that too, because in the show, while he's paralyzed, he has dreams of being in his wolf, like roaming the forest, and then in those dreams, a three-eyed raven, like an actual bird, is talking to him, like kind of calling towards him. And so that was a three-eyed raven that we see in this episode, because I guess he sees all of time. So he knows that he needs to go to Bran, but also he can just probably sense that he he has this ability.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it probably just feels like, oh, like all of a sudden you start
like
smelling things.
now it's time.
Yeah, now it's time.
So, are there rules to him using this? Does it just happen when it's convenient?
He chooses where he wants to go.
Okay.
Because later on in this season, I think at the end of season 6, he chooses to go back to when Ned found a baby Jon Snow. Because and that we didn't see in this episode, but before this episode, he was viewing some other times in the past, and he saw his dad when he earned the title of like a great sword fighter. He didn't actually earn it; someone helped him win that battle by stabbing the guy in the back. That was him trying to save his sister Lyanna, who was giving birth to Jon Snow. And so in that moment, he like kind of called out to his dad, I think, if I remember correctly, and his dad like. Almost like he heard something in the wind. He like looked back behind him, kind of, and so that was the first hint that he's actually there and can affect things. But then later on, he went back to that moment because he wanted to see what his dad was doing. So he like chose to go back in that room and saw Jon Snow. He saw his dad like and his aunt die. So he can like choose when to go, and he also chose to see the White Walkers, which when they grabbed him. So it was kind of he wanted to see them. After he saw them be created, and so that was his fault. But he always had to do it, I guess.
And that's how they were able to sense and know where it was. But it's interesting because you have to wonder. It's like almost if it's like a trap, but like since the creatures of the forest are the originators of magic in Westeros, is that like kind of like a safe? Is that kind of like a booby trap, like a bear trap of like humans using magic to learn too much? Like if you use it, you can affect it. That means you also know when you're using it. Like, oh wait a second, this guy, he doesn't belong in this scene. He doesn't belong this time.
I don't know. I just kind of assumed that because the creatures of the forest created the Night King, that's why the Night King could also see Bran, because they were both kind of using the same
that's exactly.
magic. Ha! I don't even watch this fucking show.
Come
at me, bro.
Yeah, you nailed it, Jen. That's what I think too. I think that because Bran is actually there. And human beings, I think Hodor actually saw him there because he was starting to be tapped into the magic too. Because Hodor looked at him, and like Bran was like, "Oh shit, he's looking at me." But the Night King, he is inherently magical, and so even though Bran isn't physically there, I think he's like spiritually there. But he was literally there, and so the Night King was like, "Oh, there he is," and so he always knew that he was there
because they're both part of the same type of magic.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of. That's what I would assume.
Same magic DNA.
So consequences of Bran traveling to the past. Can he go to the future, or is it just the past?
I think they can. I don't know if we've seen it.
He hasn't done it yet, but it has been hinted at that is a possibility. He just doesn't know how to tap into it.
Okay.
Yeah. In season 7, he's way more weirder. He's way more cryptic. And we get the sense that he's seen everything. Because at one point he talks to Littlefinger, and Littlefinger is like, "Hey, Bran, how you doing, buddy?" And Bran's like, "I know what you do, and I see all your secrets. I know everything." And
this doesn't necessarily mean it's the future, though.
Well, no, that's what I mean. Yeah, so we don't know that he's seen the future, but we know that he's seen way more than we've seen him see.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing about it, one of the consequences that is heavily implied in season 7 is that him doing all this time travel and seeing all this like stuff has kind of melted the personality of him.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's way more detached.
Way more detached. It's almost like he's it's almost like there's like another vessel occupying the same body. He even says like, "I'm not Bran anymore." Like he doesn't know how to like relate to people anymore. He's gotten like less and less human, which is a very interesting consequence of seeing it. It's like well, I can't actually. I'm not going to spoil that, but it is very. It's a very interesting.
You can spoil.
No, it's not because it's not.
Is it unrelated to?
It's unrelated to Game of Thrones.
Okay.
What is it a spoiler for?
It was a spoiler for Infinity War.
Oh.
But I was like,
okay.
Let me not say that.
But yeah, so it's funny what you're talking about. Those scenes where, okay, so spoiler in season 7 again. Bran gets back to Winterfell and he meets with Sansa and Arya, and they see him and they're like, "Hey, Bran, you're alive and you're like really tall, but you're still paralyzed." And he's just like, "Oh yes, Bran, that person I once was." And they're like, "Okay, I love you. See you later." It's like funny scenes where they're just like,
so
wow,
I wonder
okay.
then if he has if that's the case, I would be curious if he had actually seen the future, because he's obviously already settled with the burden of knowing everyone's past, really.
Yeah.
And like maybe I'm sure if he can choose, I would imagine it's his own almost guilt for being so curious as a person that he's like, I can't be that person who's curious anymore. I just need to detach myself. That would be my assumption for why
Yeah.
he is then the way he is,
That's a
where
good
he's so
character
detached
analysis.
because he's so separated
Mm.
and knows so much.
Yeah, he's like
It's
really
too-
detached from the present.
It's too much, and so if he feels things about it, if he's still like, these are my siblings, how, like, all the things that have been done to them, like, even just frickin'
Yeah.
Sansa, like, that's intense.
Oh yeah.
to,
There's a
like,
scene where he
know
talks to her and he like basically says he saw the wedding night, and she's just like, "Oh shit."
the wedding night that she talks to
Yeah.
Littlefinger about,
Where-
right?
yeah, where
With
Ramsay
So,
raped her.
you know, that's not something you would want to have to see for yourself. And,
Yeah.
and it's the past, you can't change it. It's, you know, in these rules, from what I can tell, it's like, he can visit the past, but the past is the past, and like,
Right.
Yes.
even if he affects it, that's something that always happened, and so it's not going to create a new timeline.
Yeah,
or anything.
nothing he can do outside of him being in the present and telling people what he
Yeah.
knows
So I
can
think
change anything.
his personality, he probably, like, maybe not chose, but it probably just like withered away because he had to be, for what he had seen. This is not like a happy, joyful world. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
the things he sees, very rarely are they anything good.
Yeah, I know.
So
Yeah.
Good point.
So let's talk about the specifics. The scenario in which he time traveled to visit Hodor while this is happening. So the Three-Eyed Raven, he was training Bran, and when Bran kind of on his own got branded by the Night King, the Three-Eyed Raven was like, "Oh, we're out of time. You're the Three-Eyed Raven now. I need to take you somewhere right now." And so he took Bran to Winterfell when Hodor was a child, because I think the Three-Eyed Raven like already knew that this
Well,
is.
as you said, if he could see all of time, he knew that
Yeah,
this was what was going to happen.
exactly. So this was like a moment in the timeline where the timeline kind of folded in on itself, and he would know that because how many other times has this happened? You know, like where the past is affected by the future. You know, so I'm sure he like was like, okay,
And
this.
vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like it's like a big moment for the Three-Eyed Raven to like know and to tailor towards and to actually like, you know, make happen that he knew. He's like, okay, I need to be here at this time.
Mhm.
So I think Bran getting branded, alliteration there,
Nah.
it was him being like, oh, now's the time for this moment that I know is going to happen. So he took
Mhm.
Bran to that moment and allowed him to. He encouraged Bran to work into Hodor. He said, listen to your friend. So he like was telling Bran, do these things because this has to happen. And so when Bran is in the past, physically or spiritually, and physically in the present, he connects to Hodor's present mind, and by being in the past, also links up his past mind, and that fusion like fries Hodor's brain, and he's hearing Mira yell, "Hold the door!" through Bran. So he like, you know, his brain.
The young Hodor
The
hears
young
it
Hodor.
through Bran.
Yeah. And so he, like, basically connects to his present brain when he's being murdered. And so, like, you know, so I think just temporally speaking, it is enough to fry his brain, but also when he's dying. So I don't know if Hodor sensed that he was being killed in the future, but he definitely.
I would say maybe.
Because, like, I don't think Hodor knew that he would have died in the present day at that moment. Like, I don't think he has
Right.
memories of being killed there.
No, but he is
it's
like
enough.
like having a seizure on the ground.
Yeah.
So like
Something's happening.
Yeah.
It's enough to really fuck him up.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it also makes you wonder, like, was this literally just like something he knew the whole time now, walking up to this moment, that at some point there was going to be a moment where he had to hold the door until he died to save everyone. Like, that was an important moment. Like, was that like just like literally his thing? Like, okay, this is like it. This is like my destiny.
I don't know though, because it doesn't seem like he knows the phrase "hold the door."
Yeah.
It just kind of morphs into Hodor, which is like really cool. But I think it's he's not like aware when he's saying hold the door when he's young. He's not like aware that I would assume he's not aware that he's saying that.
It's like
Yes,
being put
I
on
agree.
him, and he's just
he's
like reacting to
he's
it.
having a seizure,
Yeah.
and then eventually all he can say is Hodor, and then that's his thing forever.
Yeah, I know it is, because in that moment where he's holding the door, Bran is still controlling him, and it might be maybe him knowing all this stuff is what makes him so afraid of combat. Like maybe that's why, like maybe he's refusing that call, but Bran makes him do it anyways. But we don't know if Hodor knows. It is interesting because when Bran asked Hodor before all this stuff happened, he's like I saw you as a kid, you were talking like normal. Like what made you this way? And he just says Hodor, almost as if he said you. But again, I don't know if that's just the
Sounds
actor.
like Groot.
Right.
Yeah,
It's kinda,
yeah, exactly.
It is kind of like Groot. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, actually.
Yeah, I was thinking of Groot, like, if Groot were to say that, like, I am Groot, like, almost saying you, like, kind of reading that subtext, but I don't know if that's just the actor choosing that. There's no implication that Hodor knows what happened to him.
Yeah, I do think it's a very cool use of time travel that we haven't seen of the future creates the past that creates the future,
Right.
which is like a weird triangle, but it's it's a triangle. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like a paradox, but in that it isn't, in that it's consistent,
It's an infinite loop.
Yes,
almost.
yes.
Yes.
And then the only, now that Hodor has died, holding the door, then, the future is then the future.
Right.
So he is no longer part of it.
Yeah. The time loop is now contained.
Yes.
Yeah, man, dang. Yeah. It's like, I really wish, Jen, that you did watch Game of Thrones, because you have some good theories.
Thanks.
So as is Matt.
Well, he tells me, like, things that happen. So
Yeah, I spoiled the whole
you can
show
still,
for her.
You can
so.
still talk to me about what's going on and ask me my theories, because it's actually more fun to give theories when I, like, don't know all these stupid details of conversations.
You
I'm
just-
like,
you just
well,
got the highlights.
That person's like this. They're probably this reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's much nicer that way. In my
Yeah,
opinion.
there are other characters in the world that have like prophetic visions. Melisandre, the Red Lady, the Red Priestess, she can get visions of the future, but they're not totally accurate. So she can get like in part visions, and the God of Fire, or whatever his name is, the Lord of the Light. That's like a real mystical, like almost actual god power that people have.
Is that a different magic than the tree people or whatever they're called?
So there are the old gods, and so there are more than one god that has power. So the faceless god gives the power to the assassins to actually put on different faces and become different people.
Which is where Arya
Yeah, which is where Arya is. The Lord of the Light is an actual like actual manifestation of a type of magic. I don't know if there is a god associated with the green vision power that Bran has, but I think it's all like world magic, and different things focus on different things. Different people focus on different aspects of it, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, so because it's magic, there isn't really scientific accuracy.
Yeah.
So we'll skip that. Relevance to the story. So in terms of this episode in particular, because that's what I'm going off of, it's fairly relevant. As you mentioned, it kind of takes a while to get there, but then at the end it's like, oh my gosh, there's this big thing going on all of a sudden at the end of this episode. Then we watch, the drama unfold.
Yeah.
So I'd say in that sense, it's fairly relevant to the episode. It's not as relevant as I wanted it to be.
Right.
And I mean, I understand, though, there are other episodes where Bran is, like, in this cave, but I would have liked, maybe if it was almost more of, like, a bottleneck episode for this. I mean, that's just me wishing, though, because this is the episode we watched for this podcast.
Right.
But I thought that was the most captivating things. Like, I was very invested in seeing him with this three-eyed raven and seeing their journey together, but granted, this show was about more than just Bran, and so it's,
definitely.
Whatever. But,
It's very rare to get an episode that almost solely focuses on one or two characters. It's very rare.
Yeah, exactly. It's I would say less than an episode a season. That's how rare it is. But yeah, I agree with you, Jen. In this episode specifically, at the end, it's very relevant. But in terms of the show, not very relevant, just because it isn't until now that Bran even had this power. There may be more to it, there's still one more season of the show left, and he may do more of this stuff. He may impact the past, or he may have already impacted the past more than we've seen. There is a moment where people think he may happen with, like, before the show began, with the Targaryen king going crazy.
Oh, interesting.
Because his phrase is "burn them all," and if something happens with the White Walkers having to be burned,
Oh,
I don't
so
know.
maybe Bran
That's
is
a
the
theory.
one who kind of
I mean,
infected.
I have a similar theory to that, so I'm inclined to agree with you.
yeah,
There's something going on with that. At least it means something. It definitely means something that's going to be significant in season 8, because we've seen that is like pretty much the only way to win.
yeah,
Of course, now the White Walkers have a dragon.
Yeah.
So that makes things complicated.
yeah, exactly. So
Can
so
they
that
make an ice dragon?
it
that a
is.
thing?
Well,
That's what they literally.
it's
It doesn't
blue.
breathe fire.
It's blue fire,
It's blue
Okay.
fire. Yeah.
but he's an ice dragon.
It's the
pretty much.
hottest part of the fire, ironically. Even though it's an ice dragon,
That's cool.
it's the hottest part of the fire that's breathing out.
But she has 2 dragons, and I
She
feel like
does.
2 dragons is better than 1 dragon.
That's 2 is better than 1.
That is true.
But-
But they have the power. So when they kill the dragon, they have like this like crazy spear, and he was flying around, and he lined up the shot and shot it in the air. So he's like
He's really good.
he's very
The
lethal.
Night King.
Yeah.
yeah, Nick.
Yeah.
He's like
very
one
lethal.
hit kill on the dragon.
He's pretty intense, dude. He's
Yeah.
like the thing I like is that I don't know if he ever talks,
No.
but okay, so I actually really like that about him, that he doesn't have to say anything, and like
Oh yeah.
how intense and how
You-
powerful he is. He just his face and his eyes.
Yeah. You.
It's really
Jen,
intense.
so Jen, you saw the battle that John fought them at, where he raised his arms up. In the recap, you didn't see it, but there's a wide shot of all of them standing up with him, and that's like a really powerful shot because he raises his arms and all the dead people stand up next to him.
Right,
And
that's the
that's
first
the end of the
time
episode.
that we see that he can raise the dead, right?
Definitely on that large of a scale.
Yeah.
We know that he has dead people that he's killed that are with them. But that's the first time we see people that we were just with die and then become instantly
Right.
White Walkers, which is very
That's cool.
horrifying actually, because you're just like,
Yeah, like every battle they win, they'll get stronger. That's the implication. That's where John's like, "Oh, we're fucked."
It's almost like eventually it will be one-sided, because if all they have to do is just keep killing
right.
Yeah.
people.
It
And
doesn't
eventually-
matter how many of them you kill,
Yeah.
as long as they don't get completely wiped out. They have more people on their side.
So really, you have to kill the main guy, though. If you kill the Night King, does that wipe out everyone else?
No one knows.
I think there was a moment
Like,
in
is he
season.
controlling them?
I think in season 7, didn't they kill a general and didn't some other
That's
zombies die?
Right. That's true. They did kill a general and some other ones, like
I think-
disintegrated.
Yeah, John has in that battle. I think he killed another general because he realized his sword is special because he has a sword that has Valyrian steel, which is dragon glass infused. So his sword. Yeah, I know all those words. Jen just rolled her eyes.
Just like, what?
Made such
But
a exaggeration.
His sword can one hit kill the White Walkers, just like we saw in the episode where Mira threw the dagger at him or the spear and he shattered because that's also dragon glass. So
Okay.
in season 7, John worked with Dany to get a whole lot of dragon glass. So they're arming up with dragon glass to fight them.
So what if the people we see get killed? Then they'll become White Walkers.
Well, that's the thing. I think Hodor may come back as a White Walker in a moment
Yeah.
where people are like, "Oh shit!" I think it might be like a moment where they're fighting Winterfell and Hodor is there, and someone reacts and they're like Hodor, and he kills them. I don't know. I imagine
so
that
I
being a
wonder
beat.
though,
Mhm.
because Bran also has the same type of magic. I mean, obviously Bran is not as powerful as the Night King, but maybe he can be, maybe in a different way. That I wonder if because he still has some sort of a deeper connection with Hodor, maybe he can
Speak to
take
him.
him back or
So
something.
yeah, work into him while he's zombie. I don't know. There are theories about
Interesting.
Bran and the Night King. There's lots of other theories out there. There's lots of fan
Bran
theories.
becomes
Lots
the Night
of-
King.
There actually are some
Is
theories
that a
that
theory?
Bran and the Night King are one.
Yeah.
They
I
share
totally
the
see
same
that.
brain.
Like,
basically.
I didn't read into that because I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, it's on those
that's
kind of
just
bizarre.
that's just fan
That's
theory.
on you. That's on YouTube.
Yeah.
You watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's like one of those kind of theories where it's like conspiracy that Obama and Bush are the same person. What?
Well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
And
just as someone who's seen a lot of time travel, I feel like that wouldn't be that crazy, but yeah.
I know. Well, there are things that people are kind of jumping towards conclusions with because how much more dramatic weight can you utilize? Like, how much more can you use the time travel for to make it more dramatic with? You
Right.
know?
Well, I think you're definitely onto something with the Mad with the Mad King,
Yeah.
because do we ever know how he got mad, or he's just mad?
Yeah, before the show started, that's kind of the setting that we're in, is that he went crazy saying burn them all, and Jamie killed him because he was crazy.
Right.
And that's what set the stage for the whole show to begin.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm trying to think, people are trying to think of other big moments. Like, there is a historical character called Bran the Builder who built the wall, and that's a real obvious thing to say it's actually Bran doing that, but whatever. I don't know. There are historical characters that we don't see yet that he could still fit into, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, clothes and sets, obviously this show gets all the HBO money. It's very grand.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, it's like top of the line if you like want to be immersed in a world with clothes and sets and dialogue and all this kind of stuff. This is the show.
setting. The beautiful settings of them in snow and mountains and all that stuff. A little side note, I think in the beginning of the show, the cape that Jon Snow wore was actually an IKEA rug that they cut up. That's like a famous...
Really?
Yeah, it was an IKEA rug.
It was cheaper to buy IKEA rugs than to build robes for everyone, so they got IKEA rugs.
Yeah. That's a little funny clothes and set note.
Would you guys want to experience this time travel as Bran?
Knowing the consequences that he faces in season 7 for it, I gotta pass.
What does he face in season 7?
I mean, he loses his personality.
Oh,
right. That doesn't seem quite worth it.
But it does seem like you can control how much you want to use it.
That's true. Now, if I could control how much I want to use it, then yes.
Yeah, I would say, it's hard because you do have to live with knowing that, like, all these actions of things and consequences and whatever, but I might do it. I don't know, I have to think about it, but I would maybe do it.
Yeah, I mean, it allows you to almost be like a Time Lord spiritually, where you can visit any point in time.
That's true. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's kind of like you have to know when and where to go, and there are moments in history that have like crazy things happening. But I think for the most part, like the Roman Empire, what would you do? Visit a conversation between Julius Caesar and his generals? You know, I guess you would see a battle, but I guess all the important stuff in history happens on a bigger scale of time than just you sitting there watching someone talk, I guess. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I'm going to go no on this one.
How long can you spend in wherever you go?
We don't know.
Okay.
It's almost implied that he's seen more time pass in the past than he's experienced in the present. So I think there is some type of dilation where he can cram more time in the time he's actually experiencing.
Does it happen coinciding with his present? Like, does the past you see pass the same amount of time as his present?
That's what I'm not sure about.
Yeah, that's what Matt's saying. He's saying that there's some sort of dilation where he can see more in a short amount of time than it takes in the present.
It's like Inception.
Kind of Inception. Like maybe it goes like half speed or something.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. We don't really know. It's not really explained. We just know that Bran has seen a lot of shit at season 7.
He's seen a lot.
Okay. So, any other notes you guys wanted to mention about the show or anything?
That hallway crawl with the White Walkers is super creepy.
Yeah, that was, that stuff is well done. For me, I don't know that this is, like, rare to see it. So, for me, I'm like, cool, this is fun, all right, whatever. But, like, for you guys, it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? It's
right.
It's like the first time we see the smoke monster. It's like, what is
this?
Right.
Yeah, actually, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Final reviews?
Yeah.
Okay, so Hyde, why don't you start?
Well, for the show overall, or this episode, I guess for this episode, this is one of the best episodes of the show. I mean, you kind of have to have seen the whole show to fully appreciate it, but it's one of the best episodes of the show. So as an episode, as a Game of Thrones fan, I have to give it like a 9, just because it's about as good as it gets in Game of Thrones. The whole show overall, like an 8. It's a strong show. There are some things where you're just like, okay, let's move on, or this was like overly graphically violent. I didn't need to see that, or and there's a couple of missteps I think writing and pacing wise in season 7. But overall, the show is still one of the best shows ever made. I mean, the budget, the acting, the sets, like, it's just such a well-done production. So, yeah.
Okay, so I obviously will not rate the show as a whole since I haven't seen it. So I'll just rate this episode and kind of use the knowledge of what I know about the story in general. I'll probably give it, I don't know, 7 out of 10, I guess. That's being a little bit generous, honestly. But
it's fair. Yeah, it's kind of hard.
It's hard for me to say this is a great episode of the show when I haven't really seen the show. But, other than the stuff with the Greyjoys, everything else I was invested in watching, even without, really knowing every detail that was going on. I knew enough watching that recap that I kind of knew where Sansa was at, I knew where Arya was.
What she experienced.
Right. So, 7 out of 10. I wish there was more of the time travel, a little bit more oomph to it, I think would have been nice, but,
Yeah, that's fair, because obviously when I spoil stuff for you, it's interesting because I really condense things and give you the highlights. And so in that sense, the general story of the show is interesting, but to sit in it and see the minutia, I can definitely, it's fair, definitely, all your criticisms. I'm with you, Hyde. I think for the episode, it's a solid episode. It was very intense seeing the last part of the episode, and everything that kind of happened with Bran was pretty cool. So 9 out of 10 for the episode. And I agree. The show is pretty solid overall. Like season 1, when I first saw it, I kind of was just all on for the ride. And season 2, I was like, wait, who's everyone again? And it took me a while to kind of get for all to click. I mean, not that it's a detriment to the show, but there's a lot going on. And I don't know, does it need to be all that much? Maybe, maybe not. So 8 as well for me for the entire show. It's the strengths definitely outweigh the weaknesses, but there are still weaknesses. So 8 out of 10.
Yeah. For time travel, this is a hard one to do. Time travel. I've been going back and forth on what to get it. I think I'm going to just settle with a 7 because, I think the time travel is cool and there's not a lot of holes in it. I agree, especially analyzing it, that how much of it actually affects the plot. It's kind of left ambiguous.
Yeah.
Because I had always assumed, we talked about it, that he had to do that in order for that Hodor to save them. But now I'm not so sure. Now I'm not so sure he just caused some sort of disruption in the past and briefly showed Hodor something or caused some sort of brain melt with him. So, with that being said, I think it's really cool, but we don't really know enough about it yet either and how it relates. So 7 out of 10 is it was good, but I still have questions. So,
Okay, I'm way far off from you. I'm giving the time travel a 4.5 out of 10.
Okay.
I think maybe if there was more time travel in the season we haven't seen yet, and there's more to it, I maybe would give it a little bit more to kind of see, okay, maybe he ended up making the Mad King go crazy, or, things like that, showing more. I would probably give it more points. And, I like the kind of loop of it, of, his present created the past, which ended up creating the present, and it's, an infinite loop. And I do really like that. So there's definitely points there. And you're right, it's pretty self-sustained with the rules and kind of within this world. But, as I mentioned, there isn't a lot of, almost gumption or something for it. There's just not a lot of time travel knowledge for us to go off of, other than he can visit the past because of magic. And it's hard to rate time travel higher, in my opinion, just because of magic, because it's kind of, sometimes I feel like it's kind of just a cop-out for the plot. Not that it's necessarily in this show, but when time travel is caused by magic, sometimes it feels that way. So 4.5.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards Hyde on this one. It is magic, which of course, Mr. Science over here. But yeah, it is. When it happened, I was like, oh, that's really cool, because we had no idea that was even possible. So it was mind blowing in the first place. But the implication and what the potential, I don't know. I can't officially give my my official rating until the last season happens, and I kind of see what else he can do with it and what else he has done with it. But yeah, I'll be at a 6 because it is cool. I like that it's a contained loop. The causality is he created Hodor, not created Hodor, but he made Hodor the way he was because he needed, or because it needed to happen that way. I always like that when it's consistent timeline where he didn't change things; it always happened that way. So for that, you get some points for me. But yeah, 6 out of 10 for me.
Okay, cool. So on Rotten Tomatoes, the show, as you can imagine, is very highly rated. 94% is the average rating. And yeah, a lot of people like it. So if you haven't seen it, we spoiled a lot of stuff for you.
Yep.
Okay, so our next episode is back to my choice. So I picked Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I don't know how much time travel is in this. I didn't actually see the movie. I started reading the book, and there is time stuff going on. So I'm hoping it's relevant, but if it's not, that's not my fault.
Yeah, we're rolling that.
We're just kind of we're kind of at that point. We're just like, let's see what happens. So, we'll see. I did start to read the book, but I didn't finish it, and then didn't watch the movie because I figured eventually we would do it. But the movie stars Ava Green and Samuel L. Jackson. If you've never seen it, I think it's on Netflix or Amazon or something like that. I feel like I've seen it around. It came out in 2016. The synopsis says, when Jacob discovers clues to a mystery that stretches across time, see, there you go, he finds Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, but the danger deepens after he gets to know the residents and learns about their special powers. So it's kind of like, it's more of a Harry Potter-ish X-Men was kind of the vibe I got a little bit before I finished reading the book. So kind of like a meld there. And as I mentioned, yes, it's a book. So that will be our next one.
Alrighty.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So social media, we are at Time Travel Trio on Twitter as well as Instagram if you'd like to follow us. We are the Time Travel Trio podcast on Facebook if you would like us on there if you wish. We are on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. If you rate, subscribe, follow us on one of those, we'd appreciate it. If you write us a written review on iTunes, we will make up a fake time travel story about you. And personal, I am at Jen Marlis on Twitter and Instagram if you'd like to follow me.
And I'm at Foreman in Space.
I'm at Robinson is Hyde.
And
with that,
we are out of
Time.